everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very special program. My name is Tony Coffey, and I am a graduate from the class of 1956 and a member of the Alumni Relations Reunion Committee. As a quick reminder, this online event enables an attendee to participate through a personal device's microphone and/or camera. An attendee may elect not to participate through use of a microphone and/or camera. The election of an attendee to use a microphone and/or camera constitutes a release and waiver of rights in the capture of the attendee's image, likeness, and/or voice for the exclusive use by Barnard College. Mark Carnes, professor of history, joined the Barnard faculty as professor of history in 1982. His academic specialty is modern American history and pedagogy. His courses include the United States 1940 to 1975, and several courses featuring the reaction to the past pedagogy, which he pioneered in 1996 with the class of 2000, and which has swept the country, by the way. Professor Carnes served as general co-editor with John Garrity of the 24-volume American National Biography. He's executive director of the Reacting Consortium, which directs the Reacting to the Past pedagogical initiative, now used at over 400 colleges and universities. His most recent book is Minds on Fire: How Role Immersion Games Transform College.
Tony, thank you very, very much for that introduction. I also want to thank the Reunion staff for organizing this. This is not the usual sort of event, and requires a lot more organizational effort. So they decided that it would be fun to do the work to have a participatory event, which is why I also want to thank all of you for coming. There are probably easier things to do than come to a weird sort of participatory program where maybe over 100 people will be involved in an active learning experience that was created at Barnard 25 years ago, has since evolved enormously. It now involves probably 3,000 or 4,000 scholars around the world, 22 published game books. Reacting is now used at 500 colleges and universities. So this is a big initiative. It began at Barnard. Barnard, though there were some 65 institutions are dues-paying member organizations of the Reacting Consortium, Barnard is the host for the entire initiative. So what is it? Reacting to the Past consists of complex games set in the past in which students take on roles informed by important texts. You're going to be getting a little taste of the Reacting game that's set in Athens at the close of the Peloponnesian War, 403 BCE. Let me I know that some of you are veterans of my classes over the years, and thank you for joining in. Particularly, I want to thank Gina Borden, who I hope is here, who is in my class, and she's going to be the president of the assembly. So whereas students will play a reacting game, the game that's set in Athens in 403 BCE actually lasts almost an entire month. Whereas you had to do virtually no reading, students would read a 100,000 word game book, which provides the historical context to the game. There are another 250,000 words in background materials that students, rules that help thicken the historical context, and roll sheets. So it's a complex pedagogical structure that students will spend a month of their lives figuring out. They will have multiple sessions of the Athenian Assembly. All of you are being plunged into this without having read any of the materials, without having real roll sheets. So you're going to be getting just a little bit of a taste of the reacting experience. To do this, I'm going to give you a lecture on the history of the Peloponnesian War and the Athenian democracy and the context of this game. And I'm going to do that in less than 12 minutes. Okay, so this will be fast-paced, to put it mildly. We then will be going, after I've given you this lecture setting historical context, where we'll be dividing up into factions, and the factions will be strategizing because your factions will be trying to will represent as members of the assembly, and then we'll all be coming back after your breakout rooms as members of the assembly, and you'll be giving speeches, as was done in the Athenian Assembly, a direct democracy, to persuade some of you who have got special roles, who are undecided, and you're capable of being persuaded. So that's, you'll be giving speeches to persuade the unpersuaded people to pass or to reject what's called the reconciliation agreement. But let me now give you my 12-minute history lecture. The game is set in 403 BCE. The previous century was one of the most momentous in the history of mankind because it sees the rise of Athenian democracy, the world's first democratic system. And really this begins with the defeat of Persia earlier in the century, where you have Athens, which is beginning to explore the idea of, instead of having kings and wealthy families rule Athens, of having these wealthy families listen to an assembly which would have ideas. So you'd have the a century earlier, you would have the Athenian Assembly where people would express their ideas, and the well-to-do people would listen to that. They still had the power. Then Persia tries to invade Greece. Athens takes a leadership role in opposing the Persian invasion, which unfolds over the course of 20 years. And eventually, the Athenians take the leadership. They form a league to oppose the Persians, and eventually the Persians are driven off, and Athens is credited as the leading power to have saved Greece from the Persians. Then emerges one of the great figures in human history, Pericles. And Pericles takes these ideas that the Athenian Assembly has some good ideas and says, let's give more and more power to the assembly. And under Pericles, the Athenian Assembly is given all governing power. That is to say, there will be voice votes of the assembly, 6,000 people in an open air assembly at the Pnyx. And they would make all executive decisions. Well, you have to have executive figures. You have a president of the assembly. You've got keepers of the walls, keepers of the tax collectors. Also, you've got judges for the court system. Well, how do you choose those judges? Well, they learned over time that, well, you could elect them, right? But who gets elected if you elect people? The rich people ended up getting elected. The charismatic people, the winners of Olympic Games would be elected. Attractive people. So they learned that that's no way to choose leaders, and eventually the elected leaders would gain too much power. So they chose, all jobs were chosen randomly. The president of the assembly was chosen randomly, the keeper for 1 year, the keeper of the aqueducts, the tax collectors, the magistrates, 1 year random selection of all citizens, okay? This is a direct democracy, and because they could do it randomly, because the assembly itself, meeting every 10 days, would vote on all important decisions. Okay, so the democracy under Pericles becomes more and more elaborated, more and more powerful. And the money that had been paid in earlier in the century to stop the Persians, Athens says to the various tributary states of the various other states of Greece, keep making your payments to us. Well, the other states say, no, we don't want to pay you anymore. Well, the other element of the Athenian democracy is it has a mighty navy with hundreds of triremes. These are the three-tiered rowing ships, where you would the triremes would be filled with Athenian soldiers and oarsmen who would descend upon these various island city-states and coastal city-states, and they'd show up suddenly, or just instantaneously. 200 triremes, each with 200 soldier sailors, would pour out, and suddenly you've got 8,000 soldiers marching in Mytilene in the island of Samos, saying, where the hell's our tribute payment? If you don't pay it, you're in big trouble. So all of these cities eventually learned to make their tribute payments. This money is pouring into Athens, and what is the money used for? It's used to commission plays, sculpture, vast public buildings like the Parthenon. It's used to pay people to attend court systems. The courts meet every couple of weeks, and the juries would consist of 500 members reflecting the full opinion of the Athenian court system. And a lot of the wealth that came in from the various tributary states was used to allow most adult males to do not very much work at all, and to pay for slaves. So this is the Athenian democracy. It is a militarily mighty force, and its power is spreading throughout the Aegean. And wherever the Athenians are setting up tributary states, they're also planting new democracies. They're saying, look what we've done. Why don't you in the island of Samos set up a democracy as well? This concerns Sparta, another city-state in the Peloponnesus of Greece, an anti-democratic state. And it sees more and more democratic city-states being planted and more wealth going into Athens. It's becoming formidably powerful, and it's spreading democracy throughout the Aegean. And eventually it says it's too much grave of a threat. And that begins in 433 BCE, the Peloponnesian War, a strange war, an asymmetrical war. The Spartans were invincible on land. Their army could not be stopped by any other land force. And so when the Spartans would leave the Peloponnesus in the war, they'd move up north, they'd then attack Sparta, or they'd attack Athens, but then they'd come into contact with these long walls. This is a reconstruction of the long walls defending the people of Athens. The Spartan army would get to the long walls, and they couldn't get any further. And the long walls, as you can see from the map below, stretched all the way from Piraeus, the port city, all the way to Athens. And so when the Spartan army came up, the Athenians would get behind the walls, and there was nothing the Spartans could do. Meanwhile, then the Athenians would get on their ships in Piraeus. They'd then raid the Peloponnesus and attack Spartan cities and ravage Spartan cities. The Peloponnesian War was this strange war that would go on year after year after year, where Sparta would come up, attack Athens. Athens would get in there behind their walls and get in their ships and attack the Spartan coast. And neither side appeared to be winning. And that all changed in 404 and 405 BCE, when the Athenian naval commanders made a mistake. They left their ships untended on a coast up near the Hellespont, and the entire Athenian fleet was destroyed. The Spartan fleet then blockaded Piraeus, and over the course of 7 or 8 months, the Athenians hunkered down behind their walls, but there was no food that could get into Piraeus. They starved, and eventually they surrendered. Athens had lost the Peloponnesian War. Sparta enters Athens. It dismantles the walls so it can freely enter Athens in the future. And then it eliminates the democracy, and it installs some wealthy landholders. They're called the 30 Tyrants. They were led by Critias. Critias had been a student of Socrates, incidentally. That may come up later. And then the Spartans leave a garrison on the Acropolis. And whenever the 30 Tyrants encountered restive Athenian crowds, they just call for the Spartan army. And the 30 Tyrants under Critias then proceed to eliminate democratic leaders in Athens. They kill some 1,000 Athenian democratic leaders. Some democratic leaders escaped. One of them is the famous general Thrasybulus, and Thrasybulus then in the hills to the north of Athens organizes an insurgency force. These insurgents begin to wage war against the 30 tyrants and the Spartan allies. In one battle, Critias is killed. The Spartans then say, we thought it would be lots of fun to take over the Athenian Empire, but it isn't fun fighting this insurgency. We don't think empire was such a good idea anyway. We oppose the concept of empire. And the 30 tyrants have just made a mess of things. It's no fun fighting insurgents. And the Spartan army withdraws. Spartan army, now we're coming to the point of where you are. The Spartan army has withdrawn from Athens, and this was just last week in 403 BCE. Thrasybulus has entered Athens, the democratic general, and he's saying the reign of the 30 tyrants is over. I'm restoring the democracy. And we've got a lot of things to figure out. We fought and lost a war. We, the great experimental democracy, the most powerful city-state the world has ever seen, a center of ideas, of sculpture, of plays, of philosophy, of medicine, of science. We lost to those brainless Spartans. We're going to make a better Athens, a better democratic Athens. And that's what you're going to do. The assembly's meeting in 20 minutes. And you're going to figure out what to do. Most of you have been assigned to one of 4 factions, and you'll then be led by faction leaders. And the faction leaders are 4 brilliant Barnard students, and I'm going to introduce them now. And you can also maybe introduce your faction. So, and you participants will be going to either of those 4 factions. Rutendo, do you want to mute yourself and introduce you and your faction?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Rutendo Njawaya. I am Barnard class of 2023. So I am a rising junior math stats major, and I took reacting the spring of my freshman year, and I TA'd for it just this past spring. My faction is the moderate Democrats, and I think, we'll speak more about it in the breakout room.
And then Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin O'Neill. I'm a rising sophomore, class of 24. I took reacting this year in freshman year, and I'm a bio major, and my group is the Radical Democrats, who will obviously win. But again, we will talk more about that in our breakout rooms.
And we have Kendall.
Hi, my name is Kendall Poseila. I'm a rising sophomore. I took reacting freshman year, so just this past year with Caitlin and Lauren, hoping to study history and Spanish. And I'm running the Socratic faction, the best faction. And unlike what Caitlin said, we will be the ones winning. This is what happened in our class. We would. But yeah.
And Lauren.
Hello, Athenian brethren. I'm Lauren Unterberger, head of the oligarchs. I'm a rising sophomore, and I took reacting the fall of my freshman year. The oligarchs are the landowning class, and we have some things to say about this reconciliation agreement.
Okay, when you come, so you'll be going shortly, you'll be going to your breakout rooms. You should go to the breakout room. You'll have your choice, and you go to the breakout room that connects with your role assignment. If you forget which breakout room you're supposed to go to, just go to any one of them. Some of you are indeterminates. That is to say, you haven't been signed to a faction. You're going to be listening to the debate as Athenians did and voting to decide which makes the most sense. You can ask questions. The meeting will be presided over by Gina Borden. Gina, can you unmute yourself? Because Gina, how was Gina chosen as the president of the assembly? Randomly chosen. There's a sort of a lottery machine that the Athenians had, and they'd put their names in. And Gina was randomly chosen, but actually she wasn't randomly chosen. Gina is the president of the assembly. Do you want to introduce yourself, Gina?
Yes. Hi, everybody.
Good to see you. I haven't seen you in what, 9 years?
Yes, actually, it has been, I think, 9 years, which is very crazy. I'm an alum of Professor Carnes' class, two of his classes actually. I also took American history with him, but I participated in 2 Reacting to the Past games in the spring of 2013. One was the Indian independence, and another game, French Revolution, at the moment that we captured our former king and had to decide what to do with him. So
Good memory.
Reacting to the Past was one of the highlights of my Barnard experience, and was very happy to be part of this today and talk to all of you about how, yes, our radical Democrats are going.
So Gina and the other people who are not assigned to a faction, or you're maybe a farmer or Sarah, you can stay here and chit chat with me, or you can go off to a faction room. So everybody else now, we're going to open the breakout rooms, go to your breakout room and work with your team leaders. We'll see you then in 15 minutes. Okay, so it's okay if you want to stay here. You can all have another function, another role. Some of you, we sent out indeterminate role sheets, which basically is, in reacting, there are some people who are part of a faction where they've got a set of ideas supported by a particular text that guide how they think and shape their participation in the game. But there have to be some people who are listening to the debates and trying to figure out which debates make sense. So that's what you're going to be. You're going to be voting, and you can ask questions, and you're going to represent Athenians. Of those adult men who go into the assembly, there are 6,000 of you, and the law that's the first law that's being proposed after having lost the Peloponnesian War, after having been occupied by Spartan forces, that where leaders of Athens had collaborated with the Spartans to then kill other democratic leaders. The first law that's being proposed is, should Athenians forget the past wrongs of those who helped the 30 tyrants? And should Athenians be prohibited from filing criminal accusations against them? Okay, so here's the situation. Over the last year, the 30 tyrants, backed by the Spartan army, killed over 1,000 Athenian democratic leaders. Some Athenians want to go after the Athenians who supported the Critias and the 30 tyrants. Punish them for their crimes against Athens. That makes sense, right? Shouldn't they be punished for going against the democracy? On the other hand, the democracy lost the war. Okay, so its track record isn't great. If you go after them too, Athens just lost a war. Will you continue the divisions that contributed to the Athenian defeat? Athens has long been divided between people who believed in the democracy and people who thought it was stupid, who thought that this random selection of officers it was just a bad idea. Well, maybe that's why Athens lost the war. But if you go and try to punish the people who supported the 30 tyrants, is that going to just keep the divisions going and keep Athens weak? So we're going to be hearing people who are partisans on this issue. Some of them are followers of Thrasybulus, the general who fought and defeated Sparta and the 30 tyrants and drove them from Athens. Some of them will be other democratic leaders who say, no, let's just stop the civil war and bring us together. We need unity. Does that sound familiar? We've had a divisive time. We need to come together. These would sort of be the Joe Biden Democrats, all right? Then we've got some oligarchs who didn't support the 30 tyrants, but have been skeptical of should shoemakers and illiterate cultivators and dock workers, should they make laws, or should people who run farms and business enterprises, who should be that this democracy lost a war because it's really not that great an idea. Then you have got the followers of Socrates. Well, they've got a particular problem because Critias was a famous student of Socrates himself. And another one of the 30 tyrants, Charmides, he was a student of Socrates. And what is Socrates' idea? That you should have philosopher rulers, not idiot shoemakers voting in this chaotic democracy with randomly selected leaders. So Socrates is going around to all of these rich young Athenian men who loved his delicious denunciation of the democracy of dummies. And some of them became horrible tyrants like Critias. So do we allow people like Socrates to keep infecting rich, powerful people with their hatred and their disdain for the democracy? Or do we do, but the legislation going forward that you'll be voting on is to remember or forget the past wrongs of the 30? Do we make it illegal to file lawsuits against those who supported the 30 tyrants? Now, that's the issue that's going to be debated, and you're going to be deciding. You're free to decide however you wish, okay? And whereas everybody else has got 1 vote, each of you, remember this, will cast 10 votes, okay? So you're going to be decisive. You can ask questions. I don't know exactly how you'll do it, but you will be performing the important job of deciding what Athens is going to decide. This is a moment in history, this reconciliation agreement, that has gone down in history. Okay, this debate is a pivotal moment in history, and you can see it. It's a debate that we have today, and we've been deeply divided, and yet we didn't have a whole group butchered by the enemy. We didn't lose a war that lasted 28 years. Think of that, a whole generation war, and you lost it. And then you had occupied, and your citizens collaborated with the tyrant. Okay, are we going to try to forget that bad history? Are we going to say you cannot punish those who supported the collaborators with the 30 tyrants, those butchers? That's the vote you're going to be casting, and you're going to be influential because you got 10 votes. So I'm going to ask each of you to be able to, after you've heard the debates, when people vote, your votes will count extra. So I'll ask you to call out and maybe to post your votes in chat. Do you know how to use chat? Do you know how to use chat? Okay, here's how you use chat. Can you get to the cursor showing at the bottom of the screen where it's called the breakout rooms and stuff? Can you get the chat thing to come up? If you move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, you can see chat. Can you do that, Rona? Carol, can you see the chat?
Yep.
Okay, then you'll click on chat and say 10 votes against or 10 votes for, okay? And then I'll add your votes up, and that you'll be decisive. But you wait till you've heard the debate. Now, people may be chatting, making their comments, because it'll be hard we're going to try to have 120 or 30 people speak in the next 20 minutes or so. That's pretty hard to do, to have 120 people. The Athenian Assembly was 6,000 people who would meet every 10 days. That was even more impressive. Now the breakout room will be closing. People will be showing up and filling up the assembly. We're now going to the open air panics. The panics, I don't know if any of you have been to Greece. I've never been to Greece, sadly, but you can see the panics, an open air assembly. It looked out on the Straits of Salamis. That wasn't by accident. That was where the Persians had been defeated. So the Athenians looked out on the straits and saw where they had defeated the Persians. One of the first things the 30 tyrants did was they changed the seating around, and so that you weren't looking at the Salamis, because that was made the Athenians too bold, and then the 30 Tyrants shut down the assembly completely. So at 2:05, the breakout rooms are closing. Any questions for you indeterminates who are going to be deciding this debate? Unmute yourselves and you can ask your question.
No question, but I am super excited for this debate.
Oh, good, good.